This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 241 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. And Cal, we are back not just for the last episode of the year, not just for a look back at the year that was 2022 for our show, but it's also the 5-year anniversary of our show debuting.
Yeah. Happy anniversary, bud. It's
Thank you, man.
Hard to believe that we've been at it this long and that we found a way to stretch this thing out for half of a decade's worth of episodes. So look at us go. It's a big accomplishment, you know. It's been an honor. We talked a little bit about it on our Kevin Conroy tribute episode that we did, but it's one of my favorite things that we get to do. You and I, as adults, we don't live in the same house. We don't get to see each other on a regular basis. However, we have an appointment, pretty much a standing appointment once a week, where we get to spend time together and reminisce and talk about these cartoons and spend time together. So not only is the enjoyment there for putting content out for other people to enjoy, but as brothers, we get to continue to have our relationship flourish as we even well into our 30s, or almost 30s in the case of you.
That's right. So it's been a great year, Cal, and like we sort of did at the beginning of last year, here at the end of this year, we're going to look back on some of the reviews that we did this year and look back with what our favorite and in some cases least favorite episodes that we reviewed in 2022 were, as well as we'll look back on some of our special guest correspondents that we had on, and some of the other various DCAU themed highlights that happened around the world of DC Comics when it comes to tie-ins and animation and merchandise in some cases. So we've got a lot to get to here, Cal, and I think we could start it off by looking at our favorite episodes of 2022. What do you say?
Hey, that sounds like a great place to start for me. You know, we covered a lot. We had more than 50. We had at least 51 episodes. I didn't go back to count how many bonus episodes we ended up with this year, but I know we didn't have as many as we did in 2021 because there wasn't as much extra DCAU content to cover. We covered plenty enough on our standard episodes. As we mentioned, we took 1 week off for Christmas this year, and the rest, every other week this year, we had at least one new episode that came out. And starting with our top episodes, we might as well count down from, and these are our highest scoring episodes in no particular order. Well, I guess in the particular order that we covered them, we'll be fine. But we'll start with episode 200. Liam, that was a landmark episode for our podcast, as you know, we celebrated that big round number, and we did so by covering one of the seminal events happening in Batman the Animated Series, and that was with The Demon's Quest parts 1 and 2. And of course, you and I both loved this episode. Me just a little bit more than you, but we celebrated our 200th episode by me giving that episode a 37 out of 40, and you giving that episode a 35 out of 40. But man, what a great episode to have on our 200th episode, and something to certainly celebrate. But man, that episode in and of itself is somewhat of a masterpiece, I say.
Absolutely. And it is, you do get 2 parts. You have a little extra time to tell your story, but honestly, it's so epic in scale. It's so grand. It feels like it's a little bit Indiana Jones. It's a little bit like Lawrence of Arabia or something. You have that amazing score across those 2 episodes, and you have the the dramatic sword fighting, of course, reminiscent of the famous Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams Batman comics of the 70s brought to life in this animation. When we had a friend of the show, Kevin Altieri, on the show, he talked about how seminal those comics were to him and how lucky he felt to be able to direct those episodes in the case of the Demon's Quest parts 1 and 2, and bringing those characters to life, and you just feel like to coin a phrase here, like the hierarchy of power in the DC universe changed when Ra's al Ghul shows up, and it was a great deal of fun revisiting that episode. That's definitely one I think on the short list when we way back in 2017 started doing our show. That was one where like, oh man, can't wait to talk about this one, and that was a great deal of fun there.
Yeah, 5 years later, we finally, or a little less than 5 years later, we finally made it to that episode, and did so with a lot of fanfare and glee and being able to cover it. That, of course, as we mentioned, reflected in our scores for the episode. Liam, we didn't have to wait too much longer for another slam dunk of an episode as we turned the page just 1 week later to episode 201. And this episode ended up being our highest scoring episode of the entire year, actually. And we weren't alone on this covering this episode. We had a very special guest correspondent. And Liam, that was when we covered his Silicon Soul with artist, especially known for his work on Batman: The Adventures Continue, that being Jordan Gibson. We covered his Silicon Soul, and boy howdy, what an episode that was.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. Obviously, just again another seminal episode of the series that we were excited to tackle, but getting to chat about that with Jordan was so much fun. Jordan really, I think we learned across that episode, and certainly in our correspondence with Jordan leading up to when we recorded that we're really cut from the same cloth as far as our love for the DCAU and for Batman the Animated Series as well. So to get to relive such a seminal episode with Jordan, who of course has done such great work on the Batman the Adventures Continue comics and will be doing some more great work in the new year when the new season of that drops. It was a great deal of fun, and I mean that episode is, I think, even though it is in some ways a sequel, it stands alone in the sense of what I think it overall represents. It's the evil twin episode. It's an easy thing to grasp for whether you're a kid or an adult watching it for the first time, but it also, to me, and we talked about that at the time, Cal, it gets to the heart of, and not to stir up any tired internet flame wars, but at the heart of who I really believe the Batman character to be, which is the robot is built so perfectly. He's so much like Batman that he would rather destroy himself in the end than allow innocent people to come to harm, rather than let anyone die. And he sort of comes to that realization when he thinks he's accidentally killed Batman. It's such a beautiful episode. As we will continue to talk about, the specter of Kevin Conroy kind of will hang over this year and every year after, because of his surprising death later in the year. But just a tour de force performance by Kevin Conroy, playing both the android Batman and of course the real Batman, as well as Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. in that episode. So getting to relive all of that with Jordan was just such a treat for all of us, I think.
Yeah, it was great to have Jordan's perspective also from a artistic point of view. We got love hearing those professional opinions. We talked about it last year when we had or 2 years ago when we had Monica Kubina, the colorist for Batman Batman: The Adventures Continue, and best friend of the show, of course. When she was on, she shared some insights as far as color palettes and some of the things that the layman, us who aren't trained professional artists aren't necessarily looking, but once you hear those perspectives, it gives you a way to observe and try and take in the episodes in a new way. So hearing Jordan's perspective on some of the artwork and what this episode episode meant to Jordan was just it was a treat. And I didn't mention it. The reason why it was the highest score across the board is we all gave it 4 perfect scores, 40 out of 40, which puts it in extremely rarefied air for the series. We don't have too many episodes that are in that perfect 40 out of 40. So that shows you right then and there what a fantastic episode that was. So man, what a treat there. We only had a few more episodes after this one before we picked up our next top pick of the year, and that was episode 205. Liam, shifting way into the future, well, not too far into the future, but further into the future chronologically, I suppose, here, as we covered the Justice League Unlimited episode Double Date, which was one, again, we talked about episodes we had been highly anticipating. Once we sort of broke the seal on the Justice League Unlimited episodes, and especially started delving into the Cadmus arc, as we did towards the tail end of last year and beginning into this year, Double Date was one that was high on the list for me to cover and for you to cover, as it is a fan loved episode, near and dear to my heart, and it reflected in our scores for it as well. I gave it a 37 out of 40, and you gave it a 35 out of 40. So another one of those memorable episodes for multiple reasons. Having the Green Arrow, Black Canary, and Huntress and the Question team up there, sort of rivaling each other. Throw in Stephen Mandragora and a mystery, and whether or not Huntress is going to get her opportunity to actually kill the man that killed her family. And boy, you're making up a pretty good mix of storytelling right there. And man, what a great performance by our voice actors and actresses, and some great sequences and chase scenes and vehicles. It's a really, really fun episode, and it lived up to the hype, I dare say.
Absolutely. It's definitely, I think, one of the ones that stands out in those first 2 seasons of JLU. Of course, being written by the great Gail Simone, who has had such a prolific career in comic writing and brought her kind of unique sensibilities. Another one of those comic writers that should probably be a millionaire and isn't. But as far as her style and the impact she had on a lot of the modern Marvel movies and things like that, I think she probably doesn't get the credit she deserves. But her coming on to the series, and we actually got to have a few interactions with her over social media, and she was very complimentary to our show, which we certainly appreciated. And it's such a joy. That episode is such a joy, and it has it is fun, as fun and kind of wacky and quippy as that episode gets. It still tugs on your heartstrings at the end when Mandragora is shielding his son from the Huntress, just like her father had shielded her from Mandragora, and is Huntress going to kind of continue this cycle of violence that was started and that she was witness to? It's very dramatic and manages to walk that line between the fun superhero action and the quips and the lighthearted nature of part of the episode with the more dramatic superhero resolutions of it. So a great deal of fun was had, certainly, when we covered that one.
Absolutely. And about 20 episodes later, we covered the next entry on our top 5 highest scored episodes of the year, and that was another Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series pretty much dominates this list, as we'll see in just a moment. But Batman the Animated Series episode, as we got the first episode featuring Scarface, Read My Lips. Liam, this one just fell a few points shy of a perfect score from both of us, ending up a 39 out of 40 for myself and a 37 out of 40 for you. This is another one of those episodes, and we actually just recently talked about it on this month, I think, when we covered our last episode review of the year. And this is one of those episodes where everything sort of works together in harmony, in that you have some great voice acting, you have tremendous visuals, you have a fun plot, and then you have an unforgettable soundtrack, and all of these parts fit together, creating this dynamic, memorable, unique episode that takes such, on paper, a silly concept, in that your main villain is a ventriloquist doll. Like that's your main villain, is a ventriloquist doll, but it roots it and grounds it in reality, and you end up delving into things that make it help you suspend disbelief for 22 minutes and think that this may be something that could actually happen in the real world. And it's a ton of fun. As I mentioned, episode 225 was the one that we covered on that one. And boy, it's not a surprise. I think that one, when again you look at the episodes that we were excited about reviewing, I think the soundtrack alone got me excited and hyped enough to get to reviewing that episode, and we finally did. And again, it's not a surprise that our scores were pretty darn high for that one.
Absolutely, it's a good year for jazzy soundtracks. I think in our favorite episodes here, but. Yeah, that one's so much fun. George Zunza playing both the ventriloquist and Scarface, of course, who went on to voice Perry White and Superman and other voice roles in the DCAU as well. He's so much fun in that there's a lot of comedy that comes from that character, and the way the various characters, whether it's the ventriloquist or Earl Bowen as Rhino, or even Kevin Conroy's Batman, all interacting with the puppet in different ways. Is so much fun. As you mentioned, it's a very funny and fun script, because it's very much sort of a classic mobster tale in certain ways, except that the fact that the mob boss is a puppet. So you have this very fun kind of a very Batman twist on the story. As you mentioned, the soundtrack is fantastic. And then we have just great. It's a great piece of even Batman being like held captive and held suspended above like a bunch of mannequin hands. That's how he's going to fall to his death, is be stabbed to death by sharp mannequin fingernails. Is just a very strange and wacky episode, but it all comes together so beautifully, as you said, and it's quite a bit of fun.
Well, and not only is he about to be killed by razor sharp tips on mannequin hands, but the way he escapes, as we learned that Zatanna, or Zatara rather, trained him to be a world-class ventriloquist himself. So,
which does lead to maybe the best part of the episode, which is when the ventriloquist protests when Batman impersonates him by saying, "My lips didn't even move," and Scarface replies by saying, "So what? You're a ventriloquist." It's so funny, and it's delivered well, and it's written beautifully. So it's just that whole finale of that episode is just such a great deal of fun, and it's everything that's great about this show, and it was fun getting to relive that this year.
There you go. All right. And Liam, before we mention our last top episode here, I will mention we had a lot of episodes that were sort of mid 30s and lower 30s that were not Batman the Animated Series, but it was just a year. We covered a lot of Batman the Animated Series this year, with it being its 30th anniversary. So and us having more Batman in the Animated Series than anything left on the docket, as we've talked about. But it just so worked out that some of the best episodes of that series were the ones that we ended up covering this year. So wrapping things up for our top 5 episodes, highest scored episodes of the year, would be the last episode that we reviewed, being episode 240, Bullet for Bullock. Liam, you scored that one a 37, and I gave it a 36. So again, another top pick here. And having just covered that, we don't have to go into complete depth with it. I highly advise that all the listeners go back and check out all of these episodes if you haven't already. But certainly, just a few weeks back here, we covered that Bullet for Bullock episode in depth, and had a lot of fun talking about that. Another complete package there, with animation and visuals and voice acting and the plot working together with another memorable jazzy detective noir soundtrack.
That's right. It's a great deal of fun. It's as we talked about, we kind of compared and contrasted it with the comic book issue that it's based on, and had a great deal of fun kind of looking back on that story. It's definitely one that I think that maybe gets forgotten when we're talking about the DCAU holiday episodes. It's not really, the holiday isn't really center focus in the episode, but it is center in the winter between Christmas and New Year's. So we kind of fit it into our holiday review this year, and we had a great deal of fun looking back at that. And it's a tour de force performance for Robert Costanza as Bullock, especially. But yeah, it's the soundtrack, as we talked about on that episode, ended up winning an Emmy for outstanding musical composition. So that kind of says it all. It's an award-winning episode, and it's a great bit of fun to have this sort of release, for all the wacky and over-the-top characters like ventriloquists and immortal warlords like Ra's al Ghul, to have an episode that's just this very small story about this kind of soiled, annoying blowhard of a cop who's got half the city after him, and Batman's trying to help them. It's a great break from formula, I would say, and it works pretty perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead and check that one out if you haven't had the chance to do that. Liam, we'll move in just a second to our worst episodes, but what do you say we talk about some of the Elseworlds that we were able to visit as a podcast this year before we get into that bottom of the barrel?
I would love to do that, Cal, and we have quite a few trips as mentioned, especially as we get a little bit lower on our other shows, our non-BTAS shows. We have increased our trips around the multiverse, but we had a couple of trips to the world of Young Justice again this year in episodes 194 and 215. Much to my chagrin in some cases, because I really wanted to review Teen Titans Go during our Elseworlds Robin month, but our listeners had different ideas.
Yep.
And I'm not bitter about it. I just want to make that clear.
Democracy rules, and they robbed you of a couple of desired things. We missed out on reviewing the Channing Tatum dog movie because of democracy this year too, if you recall.
Never forget.
Yep.
But yes, of course, we had Young Justice in those two. Speaking of which, we also had The Batman, both in episode 199, which coincided with the release of the movie of the same name. We looked at a Riddler episode of that show. And then again, in our Elseworlds Robin month, we, in episode 214, looked at the debut of Dick Grayson in that series. That was quite a bit of fun. And then for our first, and we'll see, possibly only April Fool's edition of the podcast this past year, we really went outside of our comfort zone, Cal, and went into the Marvel universe, the Marvel animated universe, and reviewed the first episode of Spider-Man, the animated series this year.
That was a fun week. As you mentioned, we really went outside the box for the April Fool's joke. And I think that it was received well enough where maybe we don't go Spider-Man, the animated series next year, but we certainly give some other options. Nobody bit on Channing Tatum dog movie, but we might be able to convince them to go with like Magic Mike or something like that,
Fingers crossed. Some sort of Channing Tatum vehicle will come to this podcast before we're done. Mark my words.
I will also mention I successfully avoided for the second straight year reviewing Space Jam 2. So that streak is still going strong. The one veto I have per year for what we're going to not review. You brought it up at least once, maybe twice, and it was shot down yet again. So that streak continues here in the year 2022.
You even dangled it in front of me when I didn't want to do a bonus episode one week. And you were like, can we record on a Sunday afternoon? And I'm like, I don't want to. And you were like, what if we do Space Jam 2 sometime later in the year? And I said, yeah, all right. And then we didn't.
But hold him again. Yes, sorry to pull the rug out from under your hopes and dreams there on reviewing Space Jam, but continuing here with the Elseworlds we visited, we did cover a single episode of Teen Titans as we reviewed the very interesting and popular Red X episode, at least the initial one with him, Masks, on episode 212. We covered a pair of Batman Brave and the Bold episodes in episode 213 and 233. We took our first foray into the adult animation world of Harley Quinn, the animated series, with episode 220. Another memorable, fun thing, especially just to see the dynamic between that world's Joker and Harley Quinn. Lots of fun being had there. And then we covered a single movie this year as we did we had a Flash month. We decided we were going to finally pull the trigger on Flash month after realizing that the beleaguered and delayed Flash movie, which may or may not ever be released at this point, was delayed yet again. We decided to go ahead and do a Flash month. We wrapped that month up by doing an Elseworlds and reviewing the Justice League Flashpoint Paradox movie from a few years back that sort of launched and kicked off the DC animated movie universe. So check that out on episode 224. That was a fun one to cover as well.
Absolutely. So from there, we will just mention a few of our other highlights from the year. Of course, as you mentioned already, Cal, we had a couple of special guest correspondents this year. Jordan Gibson back in episode 201, which was a lot of fun. And then we introduced kind of a new concept to help lengthen the life of the show again, which was the revisiting of some episodes we've already covered. And that being, we covered three classic episodes of Batman the Animated Series with the crew from Watchtower Database. We got James, Maddie, and finally we got Ted on for the first time and revisited a few classic episodes of the series. And it should be noted that our listeners also once again burdened me in a poll by making us review The Underdwellers for a second time.
They really, it was like there was a fan movement that got behind it to control the both of us.
That's right.
It was simultaneously the most impressive and frustrating thing that I witnessed this year on Twitter is just dozens of people decided to just troll us by making a late push for The Underdwellers to be the episode that we wrapped up with. So we got to trash that episode again. If you want to listen to that, check out episode 232. Still sucks.
That's right. But of course, and then just recently on a bonus episode, we got to re-invite a friend of the show, Kevin Altieri, of course, the director from Batman the Animated Series, who directed so many classic episodes. And also he was the artist on the Batman Adventures Holiday Special, one of the artists on that book. We got to pick his brain about working with Paul Dini as the writer, as well as Butch Lukic as his inker and Glenn Murakami as his colorist, and even get a little sneak preview of an issue coming up of the Batman The Adventures Continue season 3 that he will be working on with best friend of the show, Monica Cabina.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And spoiler alert, as if you didn't catch it in that episode, go back and check that episode out. It's not that long. It's a lot of interesting little tidbits there that Kevin was happy to share with us about what he remembers about the process of how that book came together, his process for drawing the entire issue, his thoughts on how he keeps ending up being saddled with drawing New Year's Eve stories that Paul Dini has written, his reaction to sort of being given that story, some of the pain points of drawing that story, and then just hearing some great stuff from him and some behind the scenes about what is a legendary comic book for DCAU fans, and especially for Liam and I. But that was definitely fun, and Kevin also as we mentioned in that episode, will be joining us again in the new year. So coming soon on a episode in 2023, we'll have him return to be another special guest correspondent on a standard review. So looking forward to doing that. But lots of not as many special guest correspondents as we've had in the years past, but we're looking forward certainly to potentially having some more people on that we've had in the past and maybe new people on in the future. So excited to see what 2023 has in the way of special guest correspondents.
Absolutely looking forward to that, Cal. And before we get to our least favorite episodes, the last thing that we'll mention is we had several of our kind of a newer concept that we introduced within the last couple of years on the show, that being the character spotlight episodes, where we kind of look at an individual character and their kind of trajectory across the DCAU, how many appearances they had, some notable comic appearances as well, and what kind of merchandise, toys, action figures, statues, that kind of thing. We had quite a few of those this year. We had, first off, we had volume 1 of a look at Darkseid in episode 198. We also had a look at John Stewart and the Green Lanterns in episode 207, volume 1 of that. We had a look at, of course, one Harley Quinn, just in time for her 30th anniversary, also taking place in 2022 in episode 228. And then more recently, we took a look at kind of the whole DCAU career of one John Corbin, aka Metallo. So those episodes are fun, again, as we kind of find ways to revisit some of those episodes, especially the episodes that we maybe covered very early on in our show before we had our formula down pat and really gave everything the attention it deserved. So always fun to look back and to dive deep and do a specific character's arc sometimes across multiple shows in some cases.
Yeah, those are fun too, especially if you just want to kind of get an idea of what, if you want to delve into sort of the backstory or the trajectory, as you mentioned, of a singular character. We've been trying to pick popular characters and some of the ones that have appear across multiple shows, but you have a character like Darkseid, who started way back in Superman the Animated Series. We weren't able to get all of his appearances in because there's just so many of them. So as you mentioned, we limited it to volume 1, his appearances in Superman all the way up through Justice League. And then of course, those appearances would continue then later on. And that will be for a later volume, but stuff like John Stewart and the Green Lantern Corps, stuff like that, kind of just a general biography for them and an overview of what some of those appearances were. And, talking about our favorite ones, giving you a general idea of what his appearances entailed. And then, as you mentioned, kind of branching out into even talking about tie-in comics and merchandise and stuff like that. So it gives us an opportunity to go beyond just the standard review of an episode and talk about more of that character's place in the DCAU as a whole. So yeah, those are always fun. And those 4 that we did this year were pretty awesome. So definitely advise checking those out if you haven't given them a listen yet.
All right, then, Callan, let's get to the heart of the matter here and discuss maybe what for some people is the most fun episodes of our shows, which is when once in a while we find one that we just really don't care for. So we have 3 episodes in our least favorite reviews of the year by score. And up first was episode 191, Batman Beyond's April Moon, right at the start of the year, I believe. And
yep.
And the only thing I really can think about this episode off the top of my head is that a guy had buzzsaws for knees, and that the cereal was called Flaky Flakes.
You know what? That's 100% more than I remembered about this episode, because I did not. I'm racking my brain as we're talking about this. I'm like, what episode was April Moon? What was that? Now I remember it. Yeah, it was.
The guy kind of looked like Ted Danson.
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's a weird episode. It was not one that either of us really enjoyed. You were a little bit more generous with your scores. We talked about this in
Mhm.
last year's review episode, but you tend to be a little bit more generous at times with some of your scoring, especially on the episodes that maybe we don't love as much. This episode is no exception to that rule, as you gave it a 21 out of 40 and I gave it a 17 out of 40.
Mhm.
So once you start getting into the teens, you know that you're starting to get into this episode maybe shouldn't be in the in the DCAU. Maybe this should be stricken from the record. But yeah, it's I remember us having some issues with the way that Batman handled the situation at the end. There's like this weird subplot where there's like a double triple cross with the girl and the guy that's doing the experiments on the people. It's a weird episode that doesn't have like a cohesive story that it's telling. And on top of it, there were just some weird design choices. And, as we said, physics wise, I'm not sure how having buzzsaws for knees would work. But that was a distracting bit. That was included in the episode. One that I was so long ago, since it was the first episode that we tackled of the year. I have let it slip from my memory, and I don't think that I ever want to or have to think about it again now that we've gone through this review.
Thankfully, and just a few episodes later, one that I will remember forever.
Unfortunately,
is in episode 196. We finally got to a very infamous episode of Superman the Animated Series, that being Superman's Pal, the tale of Jimmy Olsen and the horniest little creep in Metropolis, and how he defeats Metallo with battery acid. This is the worst thing we have ever reviewed.
I think by score wise, it is the lowest score that we have ever given an episode, or that you've ever given an episode, at least. It goes down in history as the lowest scored episode to date, having a single digit score. I think there's only one other episode. We had one other episode that was, I think, a single digit score, but it was not an 8. So I will say, as we were preparing for this and I was looking back at these episodes, I cackled when I saw given this episode an 8 out of 40. Like that talk about rarefied air. This is, man.
I was out for blood in that review.
You pulled no punches. You didn't care. If the episode looked good, nope, it got no passes. Nothing got past you for this episode. No grace was given. It was a bloodbath for sure. Yeah. So at 13 out of 40 for myself and an 8 out of 40 for you for that episode. We did have a lot of fun, at least sort of critiquing it and tearing it apart. So it's not a bad episode. You can definitely check that out. As we mentioned, it's worth a listen just for the comedy of us being exasperated by the end of it.
Totally agree. Sometimes those are the most fun. You want a great episode, you want the 40 out of 40, or you want an 8 out of 40. The 20s out of 40s are the ones that you kind of forget about. So these ones are a little bit more legendary, I think, for our show.
I'd say it's how many superlatives can you give an episode? We talk about how awesome or great or cool looking or things look. You can probably play a bunch of our episodes together, and you might miss which one we're talking about. You could probably hear as we fawn all over great animation or great storytelling. But the episodes that are really bad are sometimes the most fun, because we are just struggling to find the words to properly describe how disappointed, frustrated, angry, irritated we are. And I think Superman's Pal is an example where we had a lot of fun doing that.
Absolutely. And then our last but not least, as far as the worst episodes of the year, we went a little bit forward to episode 219. The first but likely not last time the Zeta Project will make this list. In the episode Remote Control, an evil boy genius takes control of Zeta's programming and has him like ruin a science fair or something. Our friends over at the Watchtower Database, as mentioned, they were on our show this year, and we participated in their Zeta month on their YouTube channel. So I'm trying to be a little bit kinder to the Zeta project in the new year, trying to look at it with fresher eyes. But that episode was kind of a tough one to get through, from memory serves.
Yeah, I remember as we were going into our 2021 year in review episode, this is the first year we cracked the seal on the Zeta project. This is the first year we did Zeta project reviews. And I remember mentioning at the end of the episode for our 2021 review that we were likely to get into the Zeta project in the upcoming year based on the fact of knowing that we have no choice. We're down to the bare bones in a lot of these shows. So and your disappointment and realization of coming to the grips with the fact that we would be covering this show was palpable. I'll say that. And here we are, unsurprisingly, a episode of the Zeta Project. Maybe surprisingly that it's not 3 Zeta Project episodes that made this list. I don't know if we covered 3 Zeta Project episodes, actually. Did we cover 3?
I think we covered exactly 3, yes.
Okay. All right. So the fact that all 3 of them aren't on this list, I think we chalk that up as a win. I think that's us being fair, and proves that we are a fair and balanced pair of journalists here when it comes to our critiques. Yeah, that you cannot say that we are out for this show or just haters of the Zeta Project. No, we have represented here on this list a Batman Beyond episode, a Superman the Animated Series episode, and a Zeta Project episode. So I'd say we're fair and balanced by definition.
Absolutely, Cal. So that will bring us. We're getting towards wrapping things up, but we will look at some, as we mentioned, some DCAU highlights of 2022 and maybe lowlights in some cases. But some non-episode review things happened involving the DCAU this year. First things first, right at the start of January, we wrapped up with the 7th issue of the Justice League Infinity comic, the sequel comic to JLU, of course, written by J.M. DeMatteis and James Tucker, with art by Ethan Beavers and Nick Filardi. A pretty bombastic finale with our alternate Amazo wreaking havoc in the multiverse, and I think it left us wanting more, for sure.
Yeah, I actually recently listened to that review again, and that specifically that final episode review. And yeah, it made me realize that, we had maybe certain expectations for the comic, and that there were certain issues that maybe we didn't love. There were issues that we thought were stronger than others. But what we came to a conclusion at the end of that review is that, man, it's always fun to be in the world of the DCAU, and we want more of this stuff. Like, we will continue to support whatever DCAU content or product is pushed. So keep throwing it out there. DC Comics was what we ended up landing on. So we did not get any announcements. We've not heard anything else about additional issues, but or continuing that series. But it was a fun 7-issue set. I'm sure it is on the wonderful DC Universe, Infinite Universe application now. It's also, of course, collected in digital form, and I believe a graphic novel of a collection of issues also debuted this year too. So plenty of ways for you to consume that. If you haven't listened or checked them out yet, go and figure out if you can pick up the back issues from your local comic shop, maybe, or get the collected edition, or read them on one of the apps, because it's a fun trip through the multiverse in the DCAU, and revisiting those characters again was so fun. And as you mentioned, with J.M. DeMatteis and James Tucker working on it together with some great visuals through the artwork, it's well worth the investment of time and resources to check it out. And it was a great way to kick off the year and left us wanting more, as you said. Certainly a good sign, and seems like a success if that's the case.
Absolutely, Cal. So one of the other again highs and lows of the year came from the roller coaster that was of course in late 2021 we had the announcement of the Batman Caped Crusader show, and we were very excited, and we got some additional details like famed comic writer Ed Brubaker being brought on as the head writer of the show, and some other details that came out. Things were looking up. We were excited to learn more and more about the show, but then this summer there was a bit of a changing of the guard in the DC and the Warner Brothers family, and a lot of things changed. And one of those things was changes made to a lot of that content that was expected to debut on HBO Max, including a Batgirl movie, and of course, including Batman Caped Crusader, which was first seemingly announced to have been canceled, but was then announced maybe later that it was still in production, but it's being shopped around to other streaming services. So a bit of a roller coaster as far as our year, as we continue to cross our fingers and hope that this Caped Crusader show with so many talented people like Matt Reeves and of course James Tucker, Bruce Timm, J.J. Abrams, all working together on this show along with Mr. Brubaker. I mean, we just want to see it. We just want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And, fingers crossed we'll get some sort of update sometime in 2023.
Yeah, it was certainly a yo-yo of emotions up and down with that show, and the excitement of it. What could be coming from these great DCAU minds. Although it's not set in the DCAU, these promises of it being more Batman the Animated Series than the original. Bringing in such a celebrated writer as Mr. Brubaker to the show, and then learning that Dietrich Bader was even cast in the show in some unnamed role. Mm-hmm. So having voices that are adjacent to the DCAU or have prior experience working in Batman animation brings that excitement up a little bit there. So only to have the rug pulled out from underneath of it is a little bit frustrating. But even as of a couple of weeks ago, I believe Mr. Brubaker confirmed on his Twitter that they were still in production. So who knows what is going to come next? But we've learned, I think, most recently that some of the DCAU shows are being pulled off of the HBO Max streaming service, mm-hmm. which leads me to believe that could be a sign that perhaps wherever they show up might be where our landing spot is for Caped Crusader in the not too distant future, as a potential companion piece to Caped Crusader. So interesting to see how 2023 shapes up for that show, as we were predicted, I believe, for that show to debut sometime in 2023, maybe early or mid 2023. So we shall see indeed.
Absolutely, Cal, and from there we'll look at some of the other merchandise we saw printed. We're still getting some fun action figures.
Isn't that amazing? We're here 30 years later, and Batman. I mean, that's why we're still doing this show, is that DC still sees value in the DCAU, specifically Batman the Animated Series brand. There's still things that are being pushed out. Even as of just a couple weeks ago, we got an announcement. Congratulations to best friend of the show, Monica Kubina, whose artwork ended up on shirts and jackets and blankets, and along with Ty Templeton, they worked on some great artwork together that was released via the DC website, and companion pieces with that, some Batman the Animated Series jackets and other things that were released to celebrate this 30th anniversary. But they weren't alone.
Absolutely. So we had some more cool prints from the Mondo, including episode posters from Robin's Reckoning, Joker's Wild, and The Last Laugh. We have the Mondo Joker figure, the sort of Hot Toys-esque figure with all the different expressions and accessories. Actually a pretty good year for some DCAU figures, as well as some re-releases of some older figures, if I'm not mistaken, Cal.
Yeah, that's right. So we did finally get, thankfully, we mentioned, I believe, last year that McFarlane had picked up the DC Direct licensing. Warner Brothers DC decided to license out their DC Direct brand to McFarlane. So McFarlane continued using that brand to release some statues and some other action figures. But a couple of the figures they ended up pushing out were the previously seen but not yet released Batman Who Laughs from the Batman The Adventures Continue line that we thought was canceled. Also the second version of the Catwoman figure that was also previously seen but thought canceled, that came with an alternate Selena Kyle head from Batman the Animated Series. So it was nice to have those two things in hand after thinking that they may never see the light of day, having known that they had at least gone into production based on pre-orders being sent out and stuff like that. So it would be great to see if McFarlane would release a couple of those other figures that were shown, but we don't know how far they were along in production. That being, I believe it was Earth 2 Batman, Thomas Wayne version of Batman. There was also a Talon from the Court of Owls, who of course made their appearance in Batman The Adventures Continue Season 2. So that would be nice to have one of those in your collection, as well as there was a Hush figure and a vampire, a Red Rain style vampire Batman also, that were all shown at some point. But they are sort of kind of up in the air right now. But another good sign that McFarlane is looking to continue using the Batman the Animated Series branding was they released two different versions of a 30th anniversary Batman the Animated Series diorama and figure combination. This was a display piece that was exclusive, I believe, to Target here in the US, but came with its own card. They sold two versions of it. One was it comes with a stand with a sort of a plastic lightning bolt that has a light up feature with a button on it to sort of reenact of course the opening credits to Batman the Animated Series. But there was a special edition version that came with a signed Bruce Timm card accessory with it. So that one was a more limited version. It sold out pretty quickly, but it was nice to see that get pushed out there, even if it was a re-release of the original figure that McFarlane had put out that didn't quite fit the aesthetics of Batman the Animated Series and looked like a bit of a mashup between New Batman Adventures style and the old Batman the Animated Series costume. But hey, again, things with the Batman the Animated Series branding on it and pushing out a new diorama sure was welcome, especially if you're offering something signed by Bruce Timm along with it. For your collection. And then as we mentioned, rounding things out here, maybe another surprise was a Walmart exclusive 4-pack of figures that were all re-releases, but all done with the cell shading that has been sort of standard on the more recent releases of those DC Direct figures. And that was a 4-pack in the Walmart stores of Batman, Harley Quinn, the Joker, and a Harvey Bullock figure that was secondary market prices on that, Liam, were pretty much skyrocketing from that original release. Probably close to 8 years ago now from the original release. So it was nice for collectors or people that are just trying to get in the game or catch up, perhaps someone like yourself, maybe, that you can finally get your hands on a 4-pack of figures for about the same price that you would be paying for a single Harvey Bullock figure on the secondary market.
I was going to say, as someone who nearly paid what the price of this 4-pack was for a loose Harvey Bullock about 6 months ago, only to be outbid at the 11th hour, I can definitely say that it was a welcome sight to see this. And fingers crossed, maybe we'll get a re-release of that Batman Beyond or the Montoya or something down the line for some of those other harder to find figures that are still floating out there that go for hundreds of dollars now on eBay, if you can even find an eBay auction for them. Especially that Montoya is really, it's hard to even find people that have it, much less a decent price for it. So fingers crossed that this this Bullock set is the first of many of a way for new collectors or catch-up collectors like myself to catch up in no uncertain terms. But from there, Cal, we can look towards the world of these the comics and the DCAU tie-in comics, and we got a couple different fun announcements for things that will be coming in 2023. First, of course, was the announcement, and I think we could talk about this now. We've known about this since March of 2022, but we couldn't say anything because it wasn't public knowledge that the third season of Batman: The Adventures Continue was coming. And we'll not reveal our sources, but we had an idea of what was coming. And but it was quite a delay from when we heard that news and when it was released to the public, when it finally I guess first there was a little bit of a glimpse of a logo for season 3 on, I believe, Paul Dini's website during the summer. But even from then, it was still another several months before finally the DC Comics solicits for January of 2023 came out, and we finally saw season 3 issue 1 solicited, with of course the team coming back, Paul Dini and Alan Burnett writing, the first issue having Jordan Gibson on art, along with, of course, the best friend of the show, Monica Cabina, on colors. And we found out there would be a couple of other artists working alongside Monica, as in addition to Jordan, on this new series.
That's right. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, a friend of the show, Kevin Altieri. Again, we knew ahead of time that Kevin was rumored, or that he was involved with drawing issue number 2. We had to wait for confirmation from the solicits before we could kind of get it out there, and it just timed it just perfectly to be able to kind of pick his brain a little bit and hear his thoughts about working with Paul and Alan again on this project. And you can hear his little bit of preview of the story that he worked on in our last bonus episode. He talks on it briefly there, gives us a little preview of the story in the episode featuring Harley Quinn. So so that's something else that I'm certainly looking forward to. And then I think to cap it off, if you couldn't ask for more of having World's Finest, Jordan and Monica working on the first issue, and then you have Monica and another friend of the show, Kevin, working on the second issue, we got confirmation that coming back to the book, wrapping it up, which could be, depending on, we've read in certain solicits that this is the final season, or is being solicited as the final season of Batman: The Adventures Continue. Who else to wrap things up but book artist and DCAU comic book artist legend Ty Templeton, back fresh off of beating cancer, coming back to kind of reclaim the crown there, as the dynamic duo of him and Monica are once again reunited to wrap things up for the rest of the book. So looking forward to that. It's going to be a great 2023, and we'll have our bonus episode reviews of those issues, of course, coming out, talking about them. But hopefully we'll have the opportunity to have Jordan on and Monica on at some point to kind of talk about their process and their thoughts on this project. And if it is the finale of the series, to kind of get their thoughts on the series as a whole. So very excited to see what this season has in store for us. Some of the characters from last season will continue to make some appearances, we've learned. It'll be interesting to see if any of the threads from season 1, if we'll get Deathstroke or Red Hood picked up for season 3. Some of the other loose ends that were kind of left out there. It will be interesting to see what they can wrap up in what I believe is been solicited for 7 issues, I think,
so far. Although, as we know from season 1, that doesn't necessarily mean there will only be 7. But
that's right.
As of now, that's what we know.
So we'll see what they can squeeze into into those 7 issues there. But certainly looking forward to it and to see what that entire team has for us. And we'll be once again thrilled to check those out each month and give you our thoughts in real time as they come out.
Absolutely. And then speaking of the comic book world, while not a direct tie-in to the DCAU, there was another fun announcement, and that being in the upcoming milestone 30th anniversary book, celebrating characters like Static, Icon, and Rocket, all of those great characters that Dennis Cowan, Dwayne McDuffie, and some of the other great milestone creators created. DC is doing a special sort of anthology book, and that one of the stories, which will be written and drawn by Nicholas Draper Ivey, who's been the Static artist and co-writer for the newest version of that character in the current milestone imprint, we will be getting a very special Static Beyond story, which features an adult, older Static teaming up with none other than Terry McGinnis and an older Bruce Wayne in the Neo Gotham City of the future. And very excited. Mr. Ivy has been showing off a lot of little teases, including some direct nods to Static's various team ups with the original Batman, seeing those recreated in comic form. And of course, the second season of that Static miniseries will be coming out, focusing on Eban as the main villain as well. So a lot of DCAU ties in that Static miniseries and in that milestone anthology, even if it isn't a direct DCAU adaptation. And really excited to see that and to see more Static as the year goes on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Static fits into the future plans of DC as a whole. We know that prior to this whole revamp, that there was talk of Michael B. Jordan, I believe, directing or producing a Static movie. So there's definitely, it seemed like there were some bigger plans, and some of this milestone 30th anniversary stuff and these other vehicles that they're using Static for would seem to give him a little bit more exposure. So hopefully that both of these comics continue to do that. Regardless, as you mentioned, Mr. Ivy's the artwork that he's teased us with has just been fantastic. Definitely check out his Twitter and his Instagram, where he's posted some of that stuff. It's it'll whet your appetite enough to get you excited. So many of the visuals, as you mentioned, nearly direct homages to some of the things in the DCAU panels, looking very similar to things, specific Batman Beyond panels that look to be ripped directly from the cartoon itself. So I gotta love that. And very interested. Again, not DCAU specific. We're not continuing DCAU stories here, but certainly adjacent or close enough to feel comfortable. So definitely interested in that. And same thing with the Eban storyline, seeing how that character is kind of brought into a more modern audience. As we mentioned in the episodes that we've covered, that Eban character is such a dynamic and unique looking villain. He jumps off of the screen in those episodes, whether it's in the early episodes of that show when everything sort of looked flat, or later on, he always felt like he was a three-dimensional character that you just wanted to learn more about. You wanted to see more on screen. So the fact that they're sort of adapting that same character into this modern static mini series comic is interested to see what that looks like, and hopefully launches that character into, again, more mainstream notoriety, because it's certainly worth it to see that character brought given the spotlight, so to speak.
Absolutely, Cal. And I think one thing is, as we talked about, the DCAU influence, even on things that aren't necessarily set in the DCAU, and as mentioned, with all of the shakeups at Warner Brothers and DC this year, we did get some positive reinforcement from none other than one of the co-heads of the new DC film division, that being James Gunn, who specifically shouted out the DCAU, Justice League Unlimited, as well as Young Justice and some of the other animated DC shows over the years as being sort of direct source material that they would look to draw from and to build on for their new, whatever this new DC film universe is going to be. And I think that, coupled with, as we already know, how much Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson and the various people who worked on the Batman movie last year obviously had a great deal of care and looked to the animated series for a lot of their inspiration. It's again, as you said, but like when we were talking about the merchandise, that some 30 years on, that these characters that, you know, Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, Kevin Conroy, Andrea Romano, Shirley Walker, all these people that brought this world to life, they're still having an impact on these big, giant, major motion pictures some 30 years later.
Yeah, and I think people immediately, no one likes change. Nobody likes change. Mm-hmm. So regardless of the fact that the DC film universe was I think, putting it nicely, a mess, would probably be putting it in kind terms. Various people were ready to throw hands and ready to riot, it seemed, over the fact that that James Gunn announced that he was looking to reboot the entire idea of a DC universe franchise. And like, I mean, I can't blame people. Henry Cavill being ousted as Superman certainly hurt. It would have been great to see him in that role again. And as you've speculated, in 10 or 11 years, once the multiverse things are back in vogue yet again, we'll get a Crisis on Infinite Earths movie where maybe he'll return as the Man of Steel or something like that. But if you're going to start from scratch, you have to assure people that things aren't going to be so vastly different that they feel completely uncomfortable, because you're already making them uncomfortable by telling them there's going to be change. So the fact that he was more than willing to acknowledge that some of the things that us as DC Comics fans hold near and dear were going to be the things that inspired whatever is coming out of this new DC film universe, are things that we do know and love and find familiar. It's just a way to comfort people and to let them know that, hey, we're not veering too far off here. It's going to be more of what you love. It's just going to look a little bit different. That's all. So certainly looking to those things that have led to a long-standing success. Hey, listen, I can't see into the future. I don't claim to be clairvoyant, but I can tell you that probably 50 years from now, whenever now is, the DCAU will continue to be talked about as, established as one of the most influential Batman characterizations in history. I don't know that you can say the same thing about the Ben Affleck Batman, or the Dwayne Johnson version of Black Adam. But
right.
But so I think it's important for us to say, okay, if they're gonna go in this new direction, they're gonna continue down this road with things that we feel comfortable with. So I'm all for starting something new and starting off at a jumping point of being inspired by things that are well lauded and appreciated 30 years after they've been on, rather than trying to build off of something that was sort of a foundation of sand, that being what was the mess of the DC movie universe.
Absolutely. And I think there's a glass half way to look at that, and I think you laid it out quite nicely, Cal. And last but not least, obviously, we would be remiss not to at least touch on, as we already sort of briefly mentioned, we dealt with the passing of the voice of Batman and Kevin Conroy back in November, in very shocking and then sudden fashion. And it's been tough dealing with that, obviously, for just people that were fans of his, for people that knew him from the various shows, from the video games, whatever, people who got to meet him at Comic Cons, but certainly for his peers and his friends and his family, his loved ones. I'm sure it was all the more troubling to get through that. But it would be remiss because, as we mentioned at the time, as you mentioned kind of at the top of our show, Cal, we wouldn't be doing our show without Kevin's Batman. And if there was any comfort in that time, it was seeing the just unbelievable, almost unfathomable outpouring of love and support from his friends, from his peers, and from his fans everywhere, and feedback that we got from our tribute to him, as well as just people sharing various memories from their favorite moments from his career to personal interactions they had with him over the years. It was all deeply humbling and very moving for sure.
Yeah. Definitely encourage you to check out our episode. It was one that was, gotten some feedback from people that know me personally that were absolutely blown away by how raw and real things were. And I don't say that to pat ourselves on the back, but that's just a statement of fact. We were very raw. It was, we just found out about it, and it was real. We talk about what Kevin has meant to us. We talk about the impact that he's had on our lives, on our lives outside of the podcast, within the podcast, as we talked about our friendship as brothers, growing adult brothers. And, it still stings. It's still hard to fathom in some ways. Yes. That we will likely never hear new Kevin performances, although we did get the welcome surprise that he will be the voice of the Batman in the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League video game coming out soon. That was a loving and surprising tribute, as we got the reveal that Kevin will be voicing the Batman in that game. So maybe there's more surprises to come. We don't know, but they will certainly be welcome. But we know that there's a finite amount of new material that we would ever hear again from Kevin. But there was certainly comfort found in just the outpouring of love, the emotion that people had. Even in the small bubble of DCAU community, I think a lot of people were clear and honest about how this affected them in such a real way. But even branching out, thinking about the numerous tributes that were given to him from these actors that did much larger things than DC animation. You think Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill, gave this moving, lovely tribute, calling him, his best friend. Just incredible. And it just went on for days. It was days and days and days of tributes. And it still continues, even through the end of the year. We learned just this week that Comics This Week will have a loving tribute from Paul Dini and Alan Burnett, accompanied by artwork from Jordan Gibson as a tribute in Physical Comics, thanking Kevin Conroy. So he will live forever. His status as Batman will live on and on and on. And I have no doubt that, as we continue this podcast and we continue appreciating the different performances that he put in, whether it was in Batman the Animated Series all the way up through and including Justice League Unlimited, we'll continue to love and appreciate those things, and continue to give those tributes ourselves, as we talk about just his unique performances and the things that he provided and the things he continues to provide, even though he's not physically here on Earth anymore. But that was and will continue to be a painful but comforting reminder that while he is not here with us anymore physically, that his spirit lives on through this performance as Batman and through the lives that he touched, and the people that loved and cared about him, that are still talking about him and letting him his spirit live on through their stories and love of him. So that was I think the silver lining in all of that was just seeing how loved and appreciated he was as a human being outside of just being Batman, but as a human, as Kevin the man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm immensely proud of our show and of you, and if I could myself, for that episode that we did. It is very raw and honest and emotional, but I couldn't think of a better way that we could have paid tribute to him than what we just talked about here, that what his presence meant to us both as kids and now as adults, and how it's brought us closer together. And a certain refrain that I thought of, it's ironically, perhaps it is from a Superman comic written by Tom King, and the refrain at the end of an issue, Superman says, all can be lost, but none are alone. And I think that was a great example of that. It was a very horrible feeling of loss that everybody felt, but it was also a moment where I think everybody got to collectively mourn together and realize that we weren't alone in that moment. And I'm proud. Like I said, I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of our show, and I'm proud of everyone who was willing to share their own thoughts and their own grief with us and commiserate with us in that moment. It was not easy, but we all were able to do so together, and that was what made it bearable, and what, as you said, Cal, made it the silver lining for such a dark cloud.
Absolutely. Yep. It was a tough way to kind of cap things off here in 2022, but as we mentioned, we will be looking forward to continuing appreciating all the work that Kevin did as Batman, but also remembering who he was outside of this show. And we'll have many opportunities to do that together. And I'm very, very grateful that I get to do that with you and with all of our listeners who, again, were willing to share their thoughts and memories of Kevin, and who continue to interact with us on a weekly basis. That's another big win that we can talk about, and what we appreciate. So many great interactions with people. Liam and I got Christmas cards from listeners this year. Multiple listeners this year sent us Christmas cards and well wishes, and went out of their way to wish us, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays in our DMs. And so, Liam and I feel, I feel I can speak on behalf of Liam that we appreciate each and every one of you that spend even a minute with us every year, and that go out of your way to make us feel like we're doing something special here. We're glad that we're able to give you a distraction, or to connect with you, to be community for you, and in turn the community that you provide to us, in a space to talk about cartoons, or to talk about the comic books, or whatever it is that we're discussing. But creating that community is a big part of what we've enjoyed over these last 5 years here. Thinking back, when we started this 5 years ago, I didn't have a clue, that we would create a small community of people that would interact with us on a weekly basis, whether it's just sharing thoughts on what you thought of the episodes too, or, like I said, going out of your way to say kind things, or befriend us on social media and send us Christmas cards or what have you. But it's really, really moving when you think about it. 5 years ago, we started just a 20-minute podcast talking about Batman the Animated Series, and here we are 5 years later, reminiscing, talking about all the different opportunities we've had to talk with people involved in these projects that work for DC Comics, or opportunities we've had to have people intro our podcast, and the different opportunities we've had to interact with people in the DCAU community and on Twitter. It's pretty fun. It's pretty great to look back and see what this little tiny podcast has created, isn't it, Liam?
Yeah, absolutely. I really have enjoyed the last year, as we've just reminisced over. It's been a lot of fun, and as you said, Cal, the best part has certainly been getting to interact with fellow fans and and getting to get to know some people and hear their thoughts and get their scores and those kind of things. It's always so much fun to hear what they think. So as we begin to wrap things up, we'd love to hear from you at DCAU Review. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram there. You can leave a comment, tweet us, or of course, if you'd rather, you can send a private message if you prefer not to do so publicly. Let us know what you thought. If you had a favorite episode that we covered this year that maybe you think we didn't think to mention today, or that you thought was just a lot of fun, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you have something in particular that you're looking forward to in the new year, something maybe in an Elseworlds or a character spotlight that you'd like to hear us cover in 2023, certainly reach out to us that way. We always appreciate that. Another way you can help us, other than following us on those social medias, is of course to support us. You can support us directly via anchor.fm/DCAU review. There is a donation button there. You can also head to our website, DCAUreview.com. We have a store up there. You can get yourself a hat or a shirt or a button or any of those kind of things. And you can get yourself something there as well. And a free way to support us is, of course, you can head to youtube.com/thepodtower and subscribe and like and favorite all the videos there that we do, as well as our other friends that post content there as well. It helps us out that way as well. And a good free way to help us as well is to, on your podcast app of choice, leave us a review, give us 5 stars. That helps bump us up a little bit in the search algorithms and all that fun stuff. But Cal, as we look forward to 2023, I think we will once again be starting off the year looking to the future.
The future, Liam?
That's right. All the way to the year that's 50 years from now. Whenever now is, we will be returning to the world of Batman Beyond, and maybe the Zeta Project as well. We'll see when we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But looking forward to kicking off 2023 with another month looking at some of our Batman Beyond reviews.
It's going to be great. I cannot wait to cover.
Same here. But until next time, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Here's to survival.